Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. We got a great panel in the house. Emily Tushinsky and the maestro, Roger Fisk. Some really high-level guests. We've got Reverend Dr. William Barber. We've also got Stuart Applebaum. He's the president of the Retail Wholesale and Department Store Union. They're the ones that are attempting to organize that Alabama Amazon warehouse. So really psyched to talk to him, especially with Bernie Sanders headed down there tomorrow.
It's interesting.
But we wanted to start with a whole brand new Andrew Cuomo scandal.
This is a truly incredible one. Let's put this up there on the screen. So Governor Andrew Cuomo had a list of people known as specials or VIPs. He arranged for his family, including CNN host Chris Cuomo, to get home visits from New York health staffers who administered COVID-19 tests and were then rushed to the state lab with state troopers. So let me reiterate that. The governor of New York, whose famous CNN primetime host brother was sick with COVID, received special treatments, received access to tests, and had state resources used in order to rush his test to a state lab. Can you think of that? Is the definition of corruption. And I'm reminded of an old political scandal called Troopergate with Sarah Palin. And this is
my God.
Troopergate. I know, real fast. This is Troopergate 2.0, folks. You're calling it. I'm calling it right here.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, and you have to remember, this was back in March.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In the early days of the pandemic. And one of the big issues was that people could not get tests. The president was out there, remember, saying, oh, anyone who wants a test could get it. But the truth of the matter was, especially in New York, you could have all the symptoms and still have no ability to get tested and know if you have COVID or not.
For months this happened.
This was one of the biggest hurdles at the very beginning of this crisis. And so while average New Yorkers were struggling and wondering, am I sick? Am I not sick? Do I have this disease? Do I not have this disease? People like Chris Cuomo were getting concierge VIP service courtesy of the governor of New York, where, as you said, a top doctor from the state would come to the house, swabbed Chris and all of his family.
Unbelievable.
Rushed those swabs to the lab, and then jumped them to the front of the processing results in the lab. So they got jumped ahead of the line even after all of that special treatment. And oh, by the way, we don't know exactly how many people got this VIP special service, but it was not just Chris Cuomo. There's also reports that, these troopers were going and picking up swabs from Manhattan penthouses. All of Governor Cuomo's friends and family got special treatment while New Yorkers were dying and for want of a test and knowing what was going on in their lives. And oh, by the way, the guy had the nerve and the gall to write a damn book about the whole thing, pretending like he was some coronavirus savior. Cannot ignore the media's part in all of this. No. CNN put out a pathetic statement in result to the news that Chris Cuomo got this special treatment. They said, we generally don't get involved, Saagar, in medical decisions of our employees. However, it's not surprising that in the earliest days of a once-in-a-century global pandemic, when Chris was showing symptoms and was concerned about possible spread, he turned to anyone he could for advice and assistance, as any human being would.
My God.
It just so happens that he's able to turn to the advice and assistance of his brother, who's the governor of New York, who was totally corruptly skipping the line on behalf of his friends and family, and it's disgusting.
I also skipped over another key part, which is that the same doctor who tested Chris Cuomo and other close Cuomo friends and allies, is now the top advisor to the state health commissioner under Andrew Cuomo. And in fact, is linked to the person who was calling around and making sure that people had loyalty tests on the same calls to state officials when he was asking about their whether they needed more vaccines in their counties or not. This is just some of the most corrupt behavior, plain and simple. And in this case, he actually could pay a price for it. New York state law explicitly prohibits state officials from using their positions to secure privileges for themselves or others. And back in March, whenever New Yorkers were dying, literally, you remember those refrigerated trucks in order to house the dead in New York City? All of us do. And it's one of the worst parts of the pandemic, and it set the tone for the entire nation. He was giving out free resources to all of his friends and to his rich family members. That is a part, too, that really just galls me whenever you look at this. And the more and more we have to say that there's got to be a political price eventually that's going to pay. And I think that the Me Too stuff on top of the nursing home scandal, but the one thing that drives people crazy is when people use their position in order to benefit themselves and others. When they were screwed, when you were locked in your house, whenever you thought, I can't taste or smell, can I even go get a test? What's the point? Can't even get one. What's the point? My kid is sick. Can I go get them tested? Should I send them to so-and-so? Should I quarantine myself away from my grandma? Chris Cuomo's getting swabbed, and a New York State trooper is rushing his sample to the hospital.
It's despicable. And I think you're right. I think this really lands home politically. And by the way, as we've been saying for a while now, all of these discrete scandals, from the corruption, from the cover-up of the nursing home, from the deaths that they tried to hide and that they lied about, from all the Me Too allegations, and now for this, what does it speak to? It speaks to someone who thought the rules did not apply to them. It speaks to someone who was drunk on power and thought that they could do whatever with their office that they so chose. That's the connective tissue between all of these scandals, and why, I do think that he's going to pay ultimately a major price. The latest polling, obviously, this hasn't been baked into the polling yet, but the latest polling we had from Data for Progress already showed a majority of likely New York voters saying that it is time for Governor Cuomo to resign. I think of all of these scandals, this is so understandable. It's so visceral.
It is.
If you lived through those lockdowns, I mean, we even know people who were in New York who were sick early on and were like, maybe I have it, maybe I don't, I have no idea, I can't get a test. So if you live through that experience, I just think this is so visceral. And then the CNN part of it, remember they used Chris Cuomo's illness as
they milked this.
They milked not only his relationship with his brother and those softball interviews that we played for you here, but when Chris got coronavirus, he continued to do his show from his basement. And then remember, they staged this whole dramatic emerging from the basement. Even though it turned out later, he'd already been out of the basement. Here it is.
From the basement, cleared by CDC, a little sweaty, just worked out, happens. This is what I've been dreaming of, literally for weeks. My wife, she was cleared by the CDC. She doesn't have fever, she doesn't have the symptoms anymore, more than 7 days from her quarantine. We're still a little scared, so I'll just give you one of these. 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 Bella has, of course, taken the video. This is the dream, just to be back up here doing normal things.
And of course, it turned out after the fact, he'd been out of the basement before.
He was confronted.
Completely
He was
staged.
confronted by one of his neighbors, apparently.
That's right.
And his neighbor was like, yo, you're on TV saying you're in a basement and you have COVID. Like, can you go inside?
Right,
and
he was out on a bike ride, right?
Yeah, he yelled at him for going inside.
Oh my God. What, I mean, it is an utter disaster and a mess. And look, so here's the political situation in New York, as far as I understand it, is if you put together, obviously articles of impeachment already been introduced, but they haven't at this point had a majority of the Democratic caucus support. You have to wonder, I mean, what he was hoping for, what he was hoping to get from Biden and Pelosi and everybody else was some time to let the waters sort of steady.
Which was beginning to set in.
It was. And for the temperature to cool down and for him to move out of the news and for something else to come into the news cycle so that everybody could kind of forget what all had happened and maybe he could possibly survive. I think this makes it very difficult. And I also think, look, this puts Biden in a really, I mean, Biden's been pretty cagey saying, hey, let's see where the investigation goes. This puts Biden in a really tough spot because now you're getting to the core of how he handled coronavirus, which very much touches Joe Biden and his efforts to be able to get coronavirus under control. So this is a really tough one for him to wiggle out of.
This is just, look, it's like you said, visceral. Your rich brother, you're using your friends, state trooper. You think those state troopers didn't have them better to do? Huh? You don't think they had somebody to escort
I bet
somewhere?
They weren't able to get their own test.
Exactly. You think they and their families, when they were sick, maybe exposed to rich people with coronavirus who were hand delivering tests and more were able to? No way. This stuff is going to land in a way that I think that none of the others, even the nursing home scandal, because not everybody was connected to a nursing home, but everybody remembers what it was like. Where like, do I have it? Do I not? In the early days, can I get a test? And I don't. And he couldn't get one for months. Meanwhile, Chris Cuomo was able to get a test. It's not right.
Disgusting. All right, we're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's next.